Sometimes I think we people are like the tadpoles I kept in a pan as a boy. I watched them a few days and then I turned them loose. They seemed to swim without purpose, trying to avoid being eaten while forever sucking fresh air and nibbling nourishment. I don't suppose they knew that if they survived, they would become frogs. I think we humans swim around trying to exist, but don't know really who we are, not even aware of the coming transformation for each of us and all of us. Throughout history, we have philosophized, speculated, guessed who humans are. Who am I? Who are we? We did not know, but now we can. This century, we will know. Only when we recreate humans will we know who we are. It is time that we wake up from our sleep, ready to be a complete being. We are starting to see the core of who we are. Today I want to describe 5 parts of this new being. In the book Lives of a Cell, scientist Lewis Thomas, who was Otis Young's favorite scientist, described 10 organisms that existed in the digestive tract of an Australian termite. I assume they were bacteria. Suddenly, the 10 different creatures come together to form an entirely new creature and apparently live the rest of their existence united in that way. Today, I want to describe 5 parts of this new being, formerly called human, that they will glue themselves together into one creature, a composite being. My presentation is about transforming humans into these new creatures with less emphasis on how to do it, chiding science, psychology, spiritual pioneers, technology, and other researchers to lead in developing them. I feel the tears of sadness when I realize that I'm harsh on science, which has freed us of the great superstitions of the past. Yet current science is so primitive, ignoring most of reality and doesn't even know it. And I can say to a scientist, think of E.O. Wilson, and I'm quoting him now. He says, go into your backyard, take a pinch of that soil, just a pinch, and you have several billions of organisms there. And he says, many thousands of those have never been classified. I feel more tears when I confront my birthright in faith. Yes, I'm harsh on Christianity and religion, with its basic assumptions tied to inaccurate, antiquated myths that have entrenched themselves in our psychic and common folklore. But let truth come, whatever form it might take. I can think of a dozen criticisms of my thoughts and know there are tens of thousands of problems that need to be resolved in order to convert us into these new beings. Remember the overwhelming problems we faced in 1960 to go to the moon? But we can do it. I encourage you to go with the flow of this story and not just nitpick at the many dozens of radical ideas I'm presenting. My hope is that this vision will tell a new realistic story about what humans can become during this century, who we are, and expose our children to this exciting evolution. Often I hear people say that we cannot change human nature, that we are violent, warlike, even quote from a Bible verse. No, I say, wrong. We are not that way. Empathy seems to be at the core of who we are as humans. Jeremy Rifkin, in his book, The Empathetic Civilization, exclaims, we are fundamentally an empathetic species. And I would tell you, most Nebraskans disagree with that statement. Franz B.M. de Waal states, empathy can override every rule about how to treat others. Sam Harris, in The Moral Landscape, a new book just out, states, our powers of empathy are growing. We are empathetic. We are becoming more empathetic. We will become even more empathetic, largely due to neuroscience and applied research. This new empathy will erode violence and war. Empathy is powerful. As an elementary school principal, when two boys would fight on the playground, I would send them into a separate room and say, you're going to stay there until you can come back and tell me what the other person was thinking and feeling and why. And sometimes I had to send them back several times, but it worked. That empathy seemed to work with them. Here's an excerpt I wrote. It was printed in the letter to the editor recently. I wrote about our Nebraska representatives in Washington from Lincoln. Their lack of vision comes as they seem to shut down their own inner dialogue, to examine and know themselves. They act like they are asleep. This inner questioning seems necessary for growing the human soul and truly inspiring those of us they represent in D.C. In other words, I was saying, they are so limited in empathy because they lack that inner dialogue within themselves. Not only is empathy a part of human nature, but it is increasing in the Western world as well as globally. 1 in 4 persons have participated in group therapy and self-help groups, such as Alcoholics Anonymous. Psychologists such as Alfred Adler, Carl Jung led people into a different interpretation of human nature. This new human identity was brought about by exploring the interior self and empathy. Humans are encouraged to think about their own feelings and thoughts and those of others in their relationships. Carl Rogers said that we needed to enter into the world of another, experience reality through the eyes of others. He said that encounter groups were the most significant social invention of the century. Biologist Edward O. Wilson claims, evidence exists of an instinct to behave ethically, and a change of heart occurs when people look beyond themselves to others. Empathy influences true justice. Psychologist Martha Nussbaum states that justice is more than rules, but being able to withstand deeply what is going on for both perpetuators and victims. The desire to develop empathy is inherent in the highest aspect of being human and in Christianity and major religions. We've seen that our very nature is empathy, and secondly, that empathy is increasing. But we need to develop a more intense empathy to replace the affinity for violence in our culture. As we evolve into a stronger empathy, a young person who has a powerful feeling of empathy may find that he or she cannot kill another person or even think of others as enemies and will refuse to go to war. When empathy becomes stronger than war, and listen to this, when empathy becomes stronger than the propaganda based on war, it can be the basis for stopping war. Bullying will no longer be an option. A further increase in empathy can bring two people very close together. We can know and experience each other's thoughts and feelings, but let's go beyond just understanding each other into a deep knowing. Enable individuals and groups to slip together into a range of alternative states of consciousness. A mystical relationship may emerge as we share a common spirit, becoming one. Greater empathy can be obtained. So 50,000 neuroscientists, that's how many there are in the world, 50,000 neuroscientists in the world, along with all psychologists, that's your challenge. How can that intense empathy be developed? Probe the actual inherent design of being human. Search out the roots and meaning of empathy. Enable us to enter into the depths of another, especially with those who are different in thought, culture, and disposition. Help us to truly know each other more and better until a merger of being occurs. I ask, could a gene be altered in the egg, sperm, or zygote so that greater empathy can be inherited from generation after generation? There are dozens of ways to modify humans to become more empathetic. Find them, develop them during the next 50 years. If beings from another planet would visit us at the end of this century, they might say, those beings are so empathetic, they will live for each other. They have stopped all their wars. Now we're going to the second part.